Is that what you want me to say? You prove it's possible to sleep for days and to still think you're right here awake. The cost of living isn't much to make, but God, it's so hard to save. And when they told you everything was safe, were you safe? Were you safe? Were you safe? Were you safe? I guess this isn't such an awful place. Is that what you want me to say? You prove it's possible to sleep for days and to still think you're right here awake. The cost of living isn't much to make, but God, it's so hard to say. And when they told you everything was safe, were you safe? Were you safe? Were you safe?
Fresh off the masses, the brand new cancerous growth, who has come here to vie for your vote. Come here to cry at the camps and to mourn at the shore for the bodies that float by the wreck of an immigrant boat. Then it's back to their luxury home, couple security booths and a moat. Couple cigars, little escargot, little booze and a soak. Just breathe in the steam and the smoke. Pink salt, lavender, candles are low. Shit, when you do what you do, gotta lighten the load. And he got a life of his own that's a sight to behold. And it's a lot to control, to decipher the code or to siphon the soul. The cost of a good night's sleep for the working elite is a bargain, no matter the toll. Worth any wager, and that comes straight from the mouth of a means to the goal that will swallow us whole. Ripe for the picking if you don't mind mold, and you know I don't. Maybe we're pleasantly prone, maybe we're taking a licking, compliantly ticking and ticking and ticking, but never explode. No, I don't deliver the prettiest image, but damn if it isn't an accurate vision of natural fission, of rage at the system and abject heartbreak, patiently waiting for any who'll listen. That little blue bird who was watching your words is a federal carrier pigeon, a Langley first. It's a patient observer who hears what it wants and is trained for the worst. Oh, you got nothing to hide. They'll be the ones to decide that after they root through your purse, after they read all your text, after they raid your apartment, confiscate all of its contents, then conjure up evidence out of the air on a wing and a prayer and malicious intelligence nonsense. Any presumption of innocence long since gone, right along with your comforts and constants. Historically first they will come for the communists. So why in the fuck would I say I'm a communist? Well, it might be I love my community more than the monsters of opulence who are holding us hostage, who are vomiting promises. Might be I'm all done seeing our pensions and benefits harvested. Might be I'm all done watching the populace being disarmed in the guise of an armistice. Watching a woman collapse on the floor who will rise no more. She is wheeled out the door and you're next in line for the pharmacist. If you can get me to vote, it's a hard no confidence. But part of the charm of deception is politics wearing the mask of incompetence. It's all in the art of austerity, darling. It's all in the slide of the providence. Until home is as wide as your cubicle height and is only as deep as your coffin is. Maybe I'm miles away from impatience, aching to break off the head of the snake where the capital lust, reptile brain, and the margin of profit is. Like off with his. Like off with his.
I guess this isn't such an awful place. Is that what you want me to say? You prove it's possible to sleep for days and to still think you're right here awake. The cost of living isn't much to make, but God, it's so hard to save. And when they told you everything was safe, were you safe?
synchronize hack.
Yeah, do it.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, everybody. I think we are actually live and we did this thing.
We're here.
Man.
Did we do the thing?
I think we did. I think we actually pushed all the
YouTube.
buttons and everybody's there. Yeah, Charlie motherfucking Mac. Everybody in the house.
Look at us.
Oh man. I have missed everybody. It's been like a month since we've done one of these.
It has.
It's been ages. This is American Tradition with Jesse Jett. This guy sitting next to me. I'm of course Indy. Tonight's going to be a really special night. We're looking forward to it. Fun. You know, last time I think we did Christmas stuff, and you read Night Before Christmas, and we did some Dr. Seuss, and we're going to do another one tonight, and I can't wait. And I'm really looking forward to this, and then we're going to have a couple more, and we're going to do some Lovecraft. We're going to Call of Cthulhu.
Yeah, we're getting weird.
It's going to be
I was
fun.
thinking about doing another Dr. Seuss episode, and then I was like, why not? The only other thing I was thinking of that I'd really love to read would be some Lovecraft. And I was like, why not mix them? What a fucking fun, just phenomenally absurd double feature that is. So yeah, Catstro agrees. So let me get one. Catstro. There we go.
and now we have to we need a replacement.
Yeah, right.
So now Indy does the kitties. Shout out Warren.
Don't start pushing my shit over. Don't start pushing my shit off.
Don't knock the mic over. Come on, Catstro.
No, all right.
Don't do it.
Normally he doesn't give a shit about his stream, and tonight he's just like, oh, it looks like you've got some special stuff set up here.
Jesse's washed out. It is the HD camera. It's probably that there's a lot of light in the Camp David room. Either that or it compensates because it might be dark in there. But yeah, that doesn't look like cartoon Camp David because he's actually got a better webcam tonight. So I think we've had it once or twice.
I am coming to you folks in stunning HD this evening.
It is wonderful.
Let's see what happens if I take this light out of the equation.
All right, so we've got Kelly M. How are you, Kelly M?
Oh, would you look at that?
Okay, that's much
better. Suddenly we're back in the vibes.
All right. Of course, Cynic's in the house, and we love you, Cynic, and we miss being on stream together, and glad to see you in Discord and everywhere, and appreciate all your sharing, of course, everywhere on Twitter and the ultimate Jesse.
Right. Trying to break through the algorithm to plug this episode has been unusually difficult. I had a couple posts do all right, and I was like, okay, we might be able to get this episode out. And like I think I had like 40 views in 2 hours or something during kind of prime time today. I was like, ooh. So we'll see. But
well, that's okay.
That's everybody. An awful lot of people were like, I think something's wrong with my Twitter. Like, no, it's Twitter in general. It's all of us. Don't worry. It's not just you.
Yeah. And it's been like a month since we've done one, so a lot of people probably aren't ready, used to the cadence. I mean, it was only every 2 weeks or so. So we just took a little bit of a break. And I'm glad to be back, and hopefully I'm going to be back for a while and doing a bunch of stuff. How do we miss that? It's going to take another break for the rest of this month. It'll be back in February is my guess. Hopefully. We'll see what happens. But I'm excited to hear some. So we got some Seuss books. I know you were going to read Horton Here's a Who. Is there other?
No, I've got Yertle, the Turtle, the Sneetches, and Salisaloo are my Seuss choices tonight.
Awesome.
Which I might kind of intermingle them because I think they'd go good kind of spliced in with each other as opposed to a Seuss chunk and then a whole Lovecraft chunk. Because for my Lovecraft people, they'll enjoy two different Lovecraft pieces. For my non-Lovecraft people who think Lovecraft is tedious, we're gonna want to split those up. So we're probably gonna kick off with Sneetches tonight. And I'm going to take us back to the Ultra Bright because I think the best way for me to be able to get text for everyone is if I pop that fucker right up on the front for us, and I can honestly read it from my own screen well enough now, thanks to this this sassy webcam.
And wait, but
So we're
before we
gonna give
do
it a try
that,
with that.
actually, Kelly M reminded me that this thumbnail
Yeah,
is
can you bring
is
up the?
banging.
Oh, you
And,
can. Okay, perfect.
Yep.
I
There.
could not believe again, like the lengths she went for this were just unreal. 'Cause she asked
Seriously.
at one point, she was like, she said, "Can you get a picture of the back wall in Camp David for me?" And I was like, "Yeah." And then I didn't, because anyone that knows me knows I'm like, "Yes, I can do that." And then you won't hear from me for days. And such was the case with this. And then I got back with her. I was like, "Okay, you still need that picture?" She's like, "No, I already got it. I clipped it out. I edited it. I did what I need." And I looked and I was like, "Holy shit!" Like it's unreal.
It is.
The
Just amazing.
details in the now the fish actually in for those of you who may not know, in the animated Cat in the Hat from back in the day, the original cartoon, there is a moment where they're doing equations all over the house and start writing numbers down, and 42-0 ends up on the fish bowl. Many moons ago, she had made that fish with the joint, and it was just one of her Photoshop wizardry pieces that I actually got put on was it a coffee mug for her, like was it a birthday or Christmas or something. And I was like, we got to get your joint fish on commemorated on something. So I loved seeing him pop up on the thumbnail here, because that's a classic. And then of course Cthulhu staring in through the window. Now we're not reading that piece, but fun fact, I'm among my other nerdities, I'm a Lovecraft nerd. In his own writing, he says that that name is supposed to be pronounced without the th. It's all supposed to just be heavy, guttural KL kind of sounds. It was supposed to represent someone trying to write a word that was in a language we're not supposed to be able to speak. So it's supposed to be pronounced like Cthulhu, just really thick and throaty. And people always say Cthulhu or Cthulhu, but it's just Cthulhu. It's just fairly straightforward. Just try to choke yourself with your tongue while you say it. But that was according to the man himself. So if you hear me say Horton hears a Cthulhu, that's because I'm actually pronouncing it right.
You doing comic? Is that comic book guy?
Actually, he intended the pronunciation to be unintelligible by human voices.
Nice. Actually, I didn't know about that. So,
all right. Well, without further ado, let's get it. Let's sneak it up. So, I don't know if anyone heard the NPR bit they'd been doing, and had some lady in some classroom reading. It was supposed to be books that had an economic moral to them, and the lady was halfway through reading Sneetches when teacher, superintendent, or someone came up and was like, "We're going to stop reading this book. We're going to read something different." And of course, everyone called bullshit, because one of the big messages in Sneetches is one of discrimination.
right.
But the economic lesson is a solid one too. And like a lot of Dr. Seuss stuff, I grew up reading it and I was like, okay, that's what this book means. And then you get older and you look at it, you're like, oh shit, no, there's like a whole other like Butter Battle book and stuff like that. Like, Jesus, Murphy. It gets heavy. So I love the economic bamboozling that goes on in the Sneetches. So I figured it and Yertle the Turtle are both really good choices from like a political perspective too. So without further ado, it's the motherfucking Sneetches.
Yay. Except now I can't play this for my kids. Thanks.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, cut. Hang on. Let's try that again. We'll do this again, Brett.
Take two, the Sneetches.
Okay. It's cold in here. Okay. Without further ado, it's the Sneetches by Dr. Seuss. We have fun here. Now, the star belly Sneetches had bellies with stars. The plain belly Sneetches had none upon theirs. Those stars weren't so big, they were really so small, you might think such a thing wouldn't matter at all. But because they had stars, All the Starbelly Sneetches would brag, we're the best kind of Sneetch on the beaches. With their snoots in the air, they would sniff and they'd snort. We'll have nothing to do with the plain belly sort. And whenever they met some, when they were out walking, they'd hike right on past them without even talking. When the Starbelly children went out to play ball, could a plain belly get in the game? Not at all. You only could play if your bellies had stars, and the plain belly children had none upon theirs. When the Starbelly Sneetches had Frankfurter roasts, or picnics, or parties, or marshmallow toasts, they never invited the plain belly Sneetches. They left them out cold in the dark of the beaches. They kept them away, never let them come near, and that's how they treated them year after year. It really is. It's the Blue Checks. It's the Tale of the Blue Checks by Dr. Seuss. Oh. Then, one day, it seems, while the plain belly Sneetches were moping and doping alone on the beaches, just sitting there wishing their bellies had stars, a stranger zipped up in the strangest of cars. My friends, he announced in a voice clear and keen, my name is Sylvester McMonkey McBean, and I've heard of your troubles. I've heard you're unhappy, but I can fix that. I'm the fix-it-up chappie. I've come here to help you. I have what you need, and my prices are low, and I work at great speed, and my work is 100% guaranteed.
Wait a minute. His name's Elon. Come on, dude.
Sylvester McMuskie McBean. Then quickly, Sylvester McMonkey McBean put together a very peculiar machine, and he said, you want stars like a Starbelly Sneetch? My friends, you can have them for $3 each. Just pay me your money and hop right aboard. So they clambered inside. Then the big machine roared, and it clonked, and it bonked, and it jerked, and it burked, and it bopped them about, but the thing really worked. When the plain belly Sneetches popped out, they had stars. They actually did. They had stars upon theirs. Then they yelled at the ones who had stars at the start. We're exactly like you. You can't tell us apart. We're all just the same now, you snooty old smarties, and now we can go to your Frankfurter parties. Good grief, groaned the ones who had stars at the start. I'm sorry, at the first. God bless it. We're still the best Sneetches, and they are the worst. But now how in the world will we know, they all frowned, if which kind is what, or the other way round? Hey, Anthony. Then up came McBean with a very sly wink, and he said, things are not quite as bad as you think. So you don't know who's who. That is perfectly true. But come with me, friends. Do you know what I'll do? I'll make you again the best Sneetches on beaches, and all it will cost you is $10 eaches. Belly stars are no longer in style, said McBean. What you need is a trip through my star-off machine. This wondrous contraption will take off your stars so you won't look like Sneetches who have them on theirs. And that handy machine, working very precisely, removed all the stars from their tummies quite nicely. Then, with snoots in the air, they paraded about, and they opened their beaks, and they let out a shout. We know who is who. Now there isn't a doubt. The best kind of Sneetches are Sneetches without. Then, of course, those with stars all got frightfully mad. To be wearing a star now was frightfully bad. Then, of course, old Sylvester McMonkey McBean invited them into his star-off machine. Then, of course, from then on, as you probably guess, things really got into a horrible mess.
Let me guess, $8 for a blue check.
Right? All the rest of that day, on those wild, screaming beaches, the fix-it-up chappie kept fixing up Sneetches. Off again, on again, in again, out again. Through the machine they raced round and about again, changing their stars every minute or two. They kept paying money, they kept running through, until neither the plain nor the Starbellies knew whether this one was that one, or that one was this one, or which one was what one, or what one was who. Then, when every last cent of their money was spent, the fix-it-up chappie packed up and he went.
And he laughed as he drove in his car up the beach. They never will learn. No, you can't teach a Sneetch. But McBean was quite wrong. I'm quite happy to say that the Sneetches got really quite smart on that day. The day they decided that Sneetches are Sneetches, and no kind of Sneetch is the best on the beaches. That day, all the Sneetches forgot about stars, and whether they had one or not upon theirs. And that's the Sneetches. So yeah, I always was, obviously the discrimination message is a huge one. It wasn't until I was older and like reading it for Fox, and I was like, oh, the subtle secondary message here is that not only will people inflate these differences, there will always be a third party to pit your differences against one another and try to bilk you for every fucking dime you have.
Well,
there's always someone there to capitalize on your natural discriminatory tendencies.
does the Intercept ring a bell?
Yeah, right?
Wow.
God.
$8 stars. Hell yeah, Cynic. That's great. Oh my goodness. Yeah, you can have the blue chip for $8 and for 10. And then, well, if you have an iPhone, it's 11.
Now. I need to write a parody of that now. I totally do.
Right. And if you have an iPhone or an Android, it's 11 by the app. And if you have a Windows phone, then we're going to give you a slap, something stupid like that. I mean, I'm no Dr. Seuss, obviously, but I can try to rhyme. I'm pulling out the dad stuff here, but we got.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like when I was a kid, that was how rhyming was supposed to be. Nothing else I ever read that rhymed as tightly and as succinctly as Dr. Seuss did.
Right.
And then when you look at like what he did, and like when you actually break down like in hip hop what makes a good verse, and double rhymes, having a primary and secondary rhyme, and how densely you can pack those in, and like that's the pinnacle in kids' books or any kind of rhyming stuff. Like some of what he does is just like gymnastics. It's fantastic.
Brilliant.
It's so good. So when I started writing songs and like poems, especially in my head, there is kind of a set how long a line is supposed to be, and if it goes one syllable too long or too short, there's just this little kind of Dr. Seuss pattern in my head that's like, can't let it be, like has to adjust it. So I kind of gave in a long time ago that I'm going to have a fairly signature for hopefully kind of phrasing for how I write stuff, but that just always been in that same kind of pocket, and I blame Dr. Seuss. But honestly, these two were some of the biggest influences for me when I look at my writing now. Like I loved the wordiness of Lovecraft, and he throws around words that just don't get used anymore. And there are some just really pummeling phrases that he throws together, and it felt like a good combo. I stand by it. I think we'll maybe do one more Seuss, and then we'll get into some Lovecraft.
Cool.
If that twerks for the chat as well, if there's no objections, or if anyone's really like foaming at the mouth for some Lovecraft, we can hop into that. But I was thinking a little Yertle the Turtle, keep our anti-capitalist Dr. Seuss theme going.
I love it. There's the one, there's also the World War II stuff, the famous stuff that he did around there, like anti-Nazi stuff.
Mm-hmm.
There's all the artwork, and I've seen like galleries in San Francisco where you can buy like these little original Seuss things, and just wow, incredible.
If you ever get a chance, there's a video on YouTube, like Dr. Seuss's it was like Midnight Paintings or something, the Midnight series that he called them, and they were just really almost kind of Dali-ish things, like some really trippy dark stuff he painted, but it's still noticeably Dr. Seuss.
Mm-hmm.
Like it'll be Dr. Seuss kind of archways and buildings and stuff and fountains, but it's just floating in this blackness, and there's something very abandoned about it. Like he had some really cool, weird, disturbing things that he made and kind of tucked away. But some really cool paintings.
Yep.
All right.
Ooh.
So yeah, we're gonna get into little Yertle the turtle.
All right, I'm going to turn off the ticker while he's reading because I think it's a little distracting to read the book and have the thing dragging. So I'm going to go just to Jesse, and we're going to ticker.
Look at you editing on the fly. A sorcerer. All right. On the faraway island of Salamasond, Yertle the turtle was king of the pond. A nice little pond. It was clean. It was neat. The water was warm. There was plenty to eat. The turtles had everything turtles might need, and they were all happy, quite happy indeed. Well, they were, until Yertle, the king of them all, decided the kingdom he ruled was too small. I'm ruler, said Yertle, of all that I see, but I don't see enough. That's the trouble with me. With this stone for a throne, I look down on my pond, but I cannot look down on the places beyond. This throne that I sit on is too low down. It ought to be higher, he said with a frown. If I could sit high, how much greater I'd be. What a king! I'd be ruler of all I could see. So Yertle, the turtle king, lifted his hand, and Yertle, the turtle king, gave a command. He ordered 9 turtles to swim to his stone, and using these turtles, he built a new throne. He made each turtle stand on another one's back, and he piled them all up in a 9-turtle stack. And then Yertle climbed up. He sat down on the pile. What a wonderful view. He could see most a mile. All mine, Yertle cried. Oh, the things I now rule. I am king of a cow, and I'm king of a mule. I'm king of a house, and what's more, beyond that, I am king of a blueberry bush and a cat. I am Yertle the turtle, oh marvelous me, for I am the ruler of all that I see. And all through that morning, he sat there up high, saying over and over, a great king am I, until long about noon. Then he heard a faint sigh. What's that? Snapped the king, and he looked down the stack, and he saw at the bottom a turtle named Mac, just a part of his throne. And this plain little turtle looked up, and he said, Beg your pardon, King Yertle. I've pains in my back, and my shoulders and knees. How long must we stand here, your majesty, please? Silence! The king of the turtles snapped back. I'm king, and you're only a turtle named Mac. You stay in your place while I sit here and rule. I'm king of a cow, and I'm king of a mule. I'm king of a house and a bush and a cat. But that isn't all. I'll do better than that. My throne shall be higher, his royal voice thundered. So pile up more turtles. I want about 200. Turtles! More turtles! He bellowed and brayed. And the turtles way down in the pond were afraid. They trembled, they shook, but they came, they obeyed. From all over the pond they came swimming by dozens, whole families of turtles with uncles and cousins, and all of them stepped on the head of poor Mac, one after another. They climbed up the stack.
Yeah, those are Amazon turtles.
Yeah, right. You notice there are a couple that their eyes are X'd out. They're not the bottom stack. They're not the hardest working turtles. They're just dead and ignored somewhere in the middle of this whole operation.
And they kept everybody working while they cleaned the bodies up.
Yep. Then Yertle the turtle was perched up so high he could see 40 miles from his throne in the sky. Hooray, shouted Yertle. I'm king of the trees, I'm king of the birds, and I'm king of the bees. I'm king of the butterflies, king of the air. Ah, me, what a throne, what a wonderful chair. I'm Yertle the turtle, oh marvelous me, for I am the ruler of all that I see. Then again, from below, in that great heavy stack, came a groan from that plain little turtle named Mac. Your Majesty, please, I don't like to complain, but down here below we are feeling great pain. I know up on top you are seeing great sights, but down at the bottom we too should have rights. We turtles can't stand it, our shells will all crack. Besides, we need food, we are starving, groaned Mac. You hush up your mouth, howled the mighty King Yertle. You've no right to talk to the world's highest turtle. I rule from the clouds, over land, over sea. There's nothing, no nothing that's higher than me. But while he was shouting, he saw with surprise that the moon of the evening was starting to rise up over his head in the darkening skies. What's that? Snorted Yertle. Say, what is that thing that dares to be higher than Yertle the king? I shall not allow it. I'll go higher still. I'll build my throne higher. I can and I will. I'll call some more turtles. I'll stack 'em to heaven. I need about 5,607. But as Yertle the Turtle King lifted his hand and started to order and give the command, that plain little turtle below in the stack, that plain little turtle whose name was just Mac, decided he had taken enough, and he had. And that plain little lad got a little bit mad, and that plain little Mac did a plain little thing. He burped, and his burp shook the throne of the king. And Yertle the turtle, the king of the trees, the king of the air and the birds and the bees, the king of a house and a cow and a mule, well, that was the end of the Turtle King's rule. For Yertle, the king of all Salamasond, fell off his high throne and fell plunk in the pond. And today, the great Yertle, that marvelous he, is king of the mud. That is all he can see. And the turtles, of course, all the turtles are free, as turtles and maybe all creatures should be. Oh, thank you, Colin. Make sure to get a screenshot and put that on the books. Okay, we don't need the self-appointed finance czar of Twitter coming after us from his red sex dungeon basement.
Audit police, look out.
I know, man, in the last couple of years, a lot of Dr. Seuss books hit different, but that one especially, there are a couple times I'm like, I'm ready to hit the streets for these turtles. Oh my God, it's a little too spot on again.
Right? In a way, I was almost like the trees, but at the same time, the trees, it's not really that story, but it's like just too greedy. We will make them give us rights. Yeah, that's just one oak, but that's not really that struggle. But that's really funny. No, I was like, unionize everywhere. Like, fuck these guys. So
Trees is still one of my favorite Rush songs. I just pretend that
it's not libertarian.
They're pro-union, and they just went about it in a really left-handed kind of way.
That's right. They just wanted to chop the bosses. It's all the bosses that had the sunshine, right? It's all the bosses. They wanted to equalize it for everyone. See, they were really communists. It's really communist.
Mm-hmm. There you go. See,
the trees are all kept equal by hatchet, axe, and saw. That's the way the song ends. So.
Such good lyrics.
Just oh my God, that's.
I remember seeing some article where someone wrote it was like the 10 worst lyricists in rock, and they had Neil Peart on the list at like number 2, and he cited the trees as an example of like his bad writing or something. And I was like, I am gonna find this man. I'm gonna shoot out his porch light once a week. Like,
I'm gonna fight him,
man. Like, seriously, I was like ready to tear off my shirt. Like, you want to go?
Yo, them's fighting.
What do you want to do? What do you want to do?
Del Furious, muito boa a leitura. Whoever that is over on the Twitch. I would guess that's down in Brazil somewhere or somewhere in Portuguese. That's really cool. Good to see everyone enjoying the reading of the Seuss. Usually on American Tradition, we're playing music or doing spoken word or something cool and just not political directly. But of course, it's got some kind of political undertone to it because everything kind of is reflective of what the hell's going on right now, and it's dystopian.
And I do feel like as kind of heavy as some of our full on political episodes are, I feel like we're allowed to do some like straight up departures once in a while, because that's like, I feel like if I'm gonna give you a lighthearted non-political episode, just get it while the getting's good, because there aren't a whole lot of them to be had.
Right. Shout out to Care Bear and to Lucy. Lucy was on Sabby Sabs earlier. If you didn't see that, she did a great job. She was talking about
Yeah,
how,
if you haven't seen Lucy's video yet, getting up and making AOC crawl around in her skin for a minute, just by holding her accountable and asking her some basic questions, you should see it and you should share it, because it's fucking fantastic.
Outstanding. Even Min Press News, I saw, caught it and picked it up and was sharing it on Instagram. Jose Vega was sharing it. Of course, I think he was there with her, as well as Roger Meadows. Shout out to Roger Meadows, who's been a big supporter of INN News. We got Reef and Colin in the house. Shout out to the Care Bear, and to my brother Reef always. And he is INN's technical director. Half this stuff doesn't work without him, so thank him for everything. And he tells us what cameras we need to get and what headphones and computers and whenever we need to get something. Hey, what do we need? What plugin do we need? Hey, I need to make this sound better. What do we do? Man, and then we've got Oz in the background.
Oh, Reef, take $12,000 out of petty cash.
Oh my God, dude, you just blew my eardrums out. Thank you.
Sorry.
You're not supposed to tell them about the petty cash account, Jesse. Come on, man. That's a secret. That's a secret account.
The Swiss, the offshore, right?
That's it, right. It's in the Caymans. That's right. So, it's the account that Jimmy Dore actually secretly feeds, but.
Oh, gotcha.
Right. Joe Rogan, all those guys. They're
all that Jimmy Dore money.
They're paying our tiny little 1,000 fan follower channel, and they've been watching us struggle for a year and a half, and they think it's about time, and they're just gonna have us wreak havoc on the world. So I guess that's what we're gonna do, right? So
our ship's coming in.
Tara doing great. Watch Tara with Johnny Miller last night talking about reporting from a war zone in Donbass and how do you deal with safety conditions and stuff. It's remarkable what some of the people at INN are doing and who we're talking to and what people in space are doing. So happy to amplify everybody. So what do we got next? We're doing some Lovecraft now, right?
Well, that's what I'm thinking. Unless you guys want to do one more Seuss while we're in the mood. It's up to you. Or I can throw the last Seuss in between the two Lovecraft pieces. Give us a little sandwich. I'm gonna let chat decide.
I'm going sandwich, but we'll let chat
for sandwiches.
Chat's on the side. Chat decides.
Chat, you got a minute to pipe in here? Mix it up. Well, that doesn't help me. Okay, Lovecraft. Sandwich as well. All right, we got sandwich. So we're gonna kick it off with one. Not an awful lot of Lovecraft stuff has been adapted to like shows or movies, and it's hard. I get it. One of the pieces I'm doing tonight of his has been a couple times, and no one's ever nailed it. I feel like because for anyone that doesn't know Lovecraft, like usually the scariest moments are in kind of what's just alluded to. It's not something you see directly or whatever. It's an implication. So I wouldn't translate to a big like visual, reveal or something. This piece I would love someone to do something with, make a short film or whatever. But as such, it's always been one of my favorites. And from like a concept album standpoint, I would really love to do an EP around this story, because I've always been so fascinated with his descriptions in this of the music that he hears. So yeah, I am gonna go ahead and cut this light because y'all don't get text for this one. This is just Jesse. So yeah, get cozy. This is H.P. Lovecraft. This story is 101 years old. This is 1921. This is called The Music of Eric Zahn. I have examined maps of the city with the greatest care, yet I have never again found the Rue d'Orsay. These maps have not been modern maps alone, for I know that names change. I have, on the contrary, delved deeply into all the antiquities of the place, and I have personally explored every region of whatever name which could possibly answer to the street I knew as the Rue d'Orsay. But despite all I have done, it remains a humiliating fact that I cannot find the house, the street, or even the locality where, during the last months of my impoverished life as a student of metaphysics at the university, I heard the music of Erich Zahn. That my memory is broken, I do not wonder, for my health, physical and mental, was gravely disturbed throughout the period of my residence in the Rue d'Orsay, and I recall that I took none of my few acquaintances there. But that I cannot find the place again is both singular and perplexing, for it was within a half-hour's walk of the university, and was distinguished by peculiarities which could hardly be forgotten by anyone who had been there. I have never met a person who has seen the Rue d'Orsay. It lay across a dark river, bordered by precipitous brick, blear-windowed warehouses, and spanned by a ponderous bridge of dark stone. It was always shadowy along the river, as if the smoke of neighboring factories shut out the sun perpetually. The river was also odorous, with evil stenches which I have never smelled elsewhere, and which may someday help me to find it, since I should recognize them at once. Beyond the bridge were narrow cobbled streets with rails, and then came the ascent, at first gradual, but incredibly steep as the Rue d'Orsay was reached. I have never seen another street as narrow and steep. It was almost a cliff closed to all vehicles, consisting in several places of flights of steps, and ending at the top in a lofty ivied wall. Its paving was irregular, sometimes stone slabs, sometimes cobblestones, and sometimes bare earth, with struggling greenish-gray vegetation. The houses were tall, peaked-roofed, incredibly old, and crazily leaning backward, forward, and sidewise. Occasionally, an opposite pair, both leaning forward, almost met across the street like an arch. And certainly they kept most of the light from the ground below. There were a few overhead bridges from house to house across the street. The inhabitants of that street impressed me peculiarly. At first I thought it was because they were all silent and reticent, but later decided it was because they were all very old. I do not know how I came to live on such a street, but I was not myself when I moved there. I'd been living in many poor places, always evicted for want of money, until at last I came upon that tottering house in the Rue d'Orsay, which was kept by the paralytic Blandot. It was the third house from the top of the street, and by far the tallest of them all. My room was on the 5th story, the only inhabited room there, since the house was almost empty. On the night I arrived, I heard strange music from the peaked garret overhead. And the next day, I asked old Blandot about it. He told me it was an old German viol player, a strange, dumb man who signed his name as Erich Zahn, and who played evenings in a cheap theater orchestra, adding that his desire to play in the night after his return from theater was the reason he had chosen this lofty and isolated garret room, whose single gable window was the only point on the street from which one could look over the terminating wall at the declivity and panorama beyond. Thereafter, I heard Zahn every night, and although he kept me awake, I was haunted by the weirdness of his music. Knowing little of the art myself, I was yet certain that none of his harmonies had any relation to music I had heard before, and I concluded that he was a composer of highly original genius. The longer I listened, the more I was fascinated, until after a week I resolved to make the old man's acquaintance. One night, as he was returning from his work, I intercepted Zahn in the hallway and told him that I would like to know him and be with him when he played. He was a small, lean, bent person with shabby clothes, blue eyes, a grotesque satyr-like face, and nearly bald head, and at my first words he seemed both angered and frightened. My obvious friendliness, however, finally melted him, and he grudgingly motioned me to follow him up the dark, creaking, and rickety attic stairs. His room, one of only 2 in the steeply pitched garret, was on the west side, toward the high wall that formed the upper end of the street. Its size was very great, and seemed the greater because of its extraordinary barrenness and neglect. Of furniture, there was only a narrow iron bedstead, a dingy washstand, a small table, a large bookcase, an iron music rack, and 3 old-fashioned chairs. Sheets of music were piled in disorder about the floor, and the walls were of bare boards and had probably never known plaster, whilst the abundance of dust and cobwebs made the place seem more deserted than inhabited. Evidently, Erich Zahn's world of beauty lay in some far cosmos of the imagination. Motioning me to sit down, the dumb man closed the door, turned the large wooden bolt, and lighted a candle to augment the one he had brought with him. He now removed his vial from its moth-eaten covering, and taking it, seated himself in the least uncomfortable of the chairs. I love that line. He did not employ the music rack, but offering no choice and playing from memory, he enchanted me for over an hour with strains I had never heard before, strains which must have been of his own devising. To describe their exact nature is impossible for one unversed in music. They were a kind of fugue with recurrent passages of the most captivating quality, but to me were notable for the absence of any of the weird notes I had overheard from my room below on other occasions. Those haunting notes I had remembered and had often hummed and whistled inaccurately to myself, so when the player at length laid down his bow, I asked him if he would render some of them. As I began my request, the wrinkled, satyr-like face lost the bored placidity it had possessed during the playing, and seemed to show that same curious mixture of anger and fright which I had noticed when I first accosted the old man. For a moment I was inclined to use persuasion, regarding rather lightly the whims of senility, and I even tried to awaken my host's weirder mood by whistling a few of the strains to which I had listened the night before. But I did not pursue this course for more than a moment, for when the dumb musician recognized the whistled air, his face grew suddenly distorted, with an expression wholly beyond analysis, and his long, cold, bony right hand reached out to stop my mouth and silence the crude imitation. As he did this, he further demonstrated his eccentricity by casting a startled glance toward the lone curtained window, as if fearful of some intruder. A glance doubly absurd since the garret stood high and inaccessible above all the adjacent roofs, this window being the only point on the steep street, as the concierge had told me, from which one could see over the wall at the summit. The old man's glance brought Blandot's remark to my mind, and with a certain capriciousness, I felt a wish to look out over the wide and dizzying panorama of moonlit roofs and city lights beyond the hilltop, which of all the dwellers in the Rue d'Orsay only this crabbed musician could see. I moved toward the window, and I would have drawn aside the nondescript curtains, when, with a frightened rage even greater than before, the dumb lodger was upon me again, this time motioning with his head toward the door, as he nervously strove to drag me thither with both hands. Now, thoroughly disgusted with my host, I ordered him to release me, and I told him I would go at once. His clutch relaxed, and as he saw my disgust and offense, his own anger seemed to subside. He tightened his relaxing grip, but this time in a friendly manner, forcing me into a chair. Then, with an appearance of wistfulness, crossing to the littered table, where he wrote many words with a pencil in the labored French of a foreigner. The note which he finally handed me was an appeal for tolerance and forgiveness. Zahn said that he was old, lonely, and afflicted with strange fears and nervous disorders connected with his music and with other things. He had enjoyed my listening to his music and wished I would come again and not mind his eccentricities. But he could not play to another his weird harmonies, and he could not bear hearing them from another. He had not known until our hallway conversation that I could overhear his playing in my room, and now asked me if I would arrange with Blandot to take a lower room where I could not hear him in the night. He would, he wrote, defray the difference in rent. As I sat, deciphering the execrable French, I felt more lenient toward the old man. He was a victim of physical and nervous suffering, as was I, and my metaphysical studies had taught me kindness. In that silence, there came a slight sound from the window. The shutter must have rattled in the night wind, and for some reason I started almost as violently as did Erich Zahn. So when I had finished reading, I shook my host by the hand, and I departed as a friend. The next day, Blandot gave me a more expensive room on the 3rd floor, between the apartments of an aged moneylender and the room of a respected upholsterer. There was no one on the 4th floor. It was not long before I found that Zahn's eagerness for my company was not as great as it had seemed while he was persuading me to move down from the 5th story. He did not ask me to call on him, and when I did call, he appeared uneasy and played listlessly. This was always at night. In the day, he slept and would admit no one. My liking for him did not grow, though the attic room and the weird music seemed to hold an odd fascination for me. I had a curious desire to look out of that window, over the wall and down the unseen slope, at the glittering roofs and spires which must lie outspread there. Once I went up to the garret during theater hours when Zahn was away, but the door was locked. What I did succeed in doing was to overhear the nocturnal playing of the dumb old man. At first, I would tiptoe up to my old 5th floor. Then I grew bold enough to climb the last creaking staircase to that peaked garret. There, in the narrow hall, outside the bolted door with the covered keyhole, I often heard sounds which filled me with an indefinable dread. The dread of vague wonder and brooding mystery. It was not that the sounds were hideous, for they were not, but that they held vibrations suggesting nothing on this globe of earth, and that at certain intervals they assumed a symphonic quality which I could hardly conceive as produced by one player. Certainly, Erich Zahn was a genius of wild power. As the weeks passed, the playing grew wilder, whilst the old musician acquired an increasing haggardness and a furtiveness pitiful to behold. He now refused to admit me at any time, and he shunned me whenever we met on the stairs. Then one night, as I listened at the door, I heard the shrieking viol swell into a chaotic babble of sound, a pandemonium which would have led me to doubt my own shaking sanity had there not come from behind that barred portal a piteous proof that the horror was real. The awful, inarticulate cry which only a mute can utter, and which rises only in moments of the most terrible fear or anguish. I knocked repeatedly at the door, but I received no response. Afterward, I waited in the black hallway, shivering with cold and fear, till I heard the poor musician's feeble effort to rise from the floor by the aid of a chair. Believing him just conscious after a fainting fit, I renewed my rapping, at the same time calling out my name reassuringly. I heard Zahn stumble to the window and close both shutter and sash, and then stumble to the door, which he falteringly unfastened to admit me. This time, his delight at having me present was real, for his distorted face gleamed with relief, while he clutched at my coat as a child clutched at its mother's skirts. Shaking pathetically, the old man forced me into a chair, whilst he sank into another, beside which his viol and bow lay carelessly on the floor. He sat for some time inactive, nodding oddly, but having a paradoxical suggestion of intense and frightened listening. Subsequently, he seemed to be satisfied, and crossing to a chair by the table, he wrote a brief note, handed it to me, and returned to the table, where he began to write rapidly and incessantly. The note implored me, in the name of mercy, and for the sake of my own curiosity, to wait where I was, while he prepared a full account, in German, of all the marvels and terrors which beset him. I waited, and the dumb man's pencil flew. It was perhaps an hour later, while I still waited, and while the old musician's feverishly written sheets still continued to pile up, that I saw him start, as from the hint of a horrible shock. Unmistakably, he was looking at the curtained window and listening shudderingly. Then I half fancied I heard a sound myself, though it was not a horrible sound, but rather an exquisitely low and infinitely distant musical note, suggesting a player in one of the neighboring houses, or in some abode beyond the lofty wall over which I had never been able to look. Upon Zahn, the effect was terrible, for dropping his pencil, suddenly he rose, seized his viol, and commenced to rend the night with the wildest playing I had ever heard from his bow, save when listening at the barred door. It would be useless to describe the playing of Eric Zahn on that dreadful night. It was more horrible than anything I'd overheard because I could now see the expression of his face and could realize that this time the motive was stark fear. He was trying to make a noise, to ward something off or drown something out. What, I could not imagine, awesome though I felt it must be. The playing grew fantastic, tenuous, and hysterical, yet kept to the last the qualities of supreme genius which I knew this strange old man possessed. I recognized the air. It was a wild Hungarian dance, popular in the theaters, and I reflected for a moment that this was the first time I'd ever heard Zahn play the work of another composer. Louder and louder, wilder and wilder, mounted the shrieking and whining of that desperate viol. The player was dripping with an uncanny perspiration and twisted like a monkey, always looking frantically at the curtained window. In his frenzied strains, I could almost see shadowy satyrs and bacchanals dancing and whirling insanely through the seething abysses of clouds and smoke and lightning. And then I thought I heard a shriller, steadier note that was not from the viol, a calm, deliberate, purposeful, mocking note from far away in the west. At this juncture, the shutter began to rattle in a howling night wind which had sprung up outside as if in answer to the mad playing within. Zahn's screaming viol now outdid itself, emitting sounds I had never thought a viol could emit. The shutter rattled more loudly, unfastened, and commenced slamming against the window. Then the glass broke shiveringly under the persistent impacts, and that chill wind rushed in, making the candles sputter and rustling the sheets of paper on the table where Zahn had begun to write out his horrible secret. I looked at Zahn and saw that he was past conscious observation. His blue eyes were bulging, glassy, and sightless, and that frantic playing had become a blind, mechanical, unrecognizable orgy that no pen could even suggest. A sudden gust, stronger than the others, caught up the manuscript and bore it toward the window. I followed the flying sheets in desperation, but they were gone before I reached the demolished panes. Then I remembered my old wish to gaze from this window, the only window in the Rue d'Orsay from which one might see the slope beyond the wall, and the city outspread beneath. It was very dark, but the city's lights always burned, and I expected to see them there amidst the rain and the wind. Yet when I looked from the highest of all gable windows, looked while the candles sputtered and the insane viol howled with the night wind, I saw no city spread below, and no friendly lights gleamed from remembered spaces, but only the blackness of space illimitable, unimagined space alive with motion and music and having no semblance of anything on earth. And as I stood there looking in terror, the wind blew out both candles in that ancient peaked garret, leaving me in savage, impenetrable darkness with chaos and pandemonium before me and the demon madness of that night-baying viol behind me. I staggered back in the dark, without the means of striking a light, crashing against the table, overturning a chair, and finally groping my way to the place from the blackness screamed with that shocking music. To save myself and Eric Zahn, I could at least try, whatever the powers opposed to me. Once, I thought some chill thing brushed me, and I screamed, but my scream could not be heard above that hideous viol. Suddenly, out of the blackness, the madly sawing bow struck me, and I knew I was close to the player. I felt ahead, touched the back of his chair, and found and shook his shoulder in an effort to bring him to his senses. He did not respond, and still the viol shrieked on without slackening. I moved my hand to his head, whose mechanical nodding I was able to stop, and I shouted in his ear that we both must flee from these unknown things of the night. But he neither answered me nor abated the frenzy of his unutterable music, while all through the garret strange currents of wind seemed to dance in the darkness and babble. When my hand touched his ear, I shuddered, though I knew not why. Not until I felt the still face, the ice-cold, stiffened, unbreathing face whose glassy eyes bulged uselessly into the void. Then by some miracle, finding the door and the large wooden bolt, I plunged wildly away from that glassy-eyed thing in the dark, and from the ghoulish howling of that accursed viol whose fury increased even as I plunged. leaping, floating, flying down those endless stairs, through the dark house, racing mindlessly out into the narrow, steep, and ancient street of steps and tottering houses, clattering down steps and over cobbles to the lower streets, that putrid canyon-walled river, panting across the great dark bridge to the broader, healthier streets and boulevards we know. All these are terrible impressions that linger with me. And I recall that there was no wind, and that the moon was out, and that all the lights of the city twinkled. Despite my most careful searches and investigations, I have never since been able to find the Rue d'Orsay. But I am not wholly sorry, either for this or for the loss in undreamable abysses of the closely written sheets which alone could have explained the music of Eric Zahn.
Yeah, take a long drink after that.
And scene.
Woo. Hey, everybody. Hi, everybody.
Oh, the cat came in and meowed like 5 times. Where he's like, "Oh, thank Christ, you're done. I couldn't hold that in any longer." Come on.
What's up,
Come
Fidel?
Come on, Storm.
He just wants to chill.
Come over here. Come here, Storm.
Yeah.
Boy.
On command. Yeah. Hi.
Yeah.
Yeah, he can't hear because Jesse has
angry
earbuds in, so it doesn't matter. Okay. Okay, I can't officially I can't officially like hit the button anymore. It pains me, but
I know.
Yeah. Well, it's still there.
Oh, there.
It's tempting.
Look at this boy. Look at this. I need it. I gotta get one. We can afford the royalties.
All right. All right, for one, yeah, we can do one. All right, so we got one more Seuss, and we got one more Lovecraft. So everybody, we're gonna have some fun. Then go get yourself a little potty break, and then we're definitely gonna have to get into some Lovecraft because that looks like it's gonna take a little bit. So what else is happening? Let me tell you. So Care Bear and Reef have been killing it over on INN News. If you haven't been paying attention, and most of you have, so that's a good thing. But for those of you who haven't, they've had Brett Wilkins from Common Dreams on lately. There are some pretty good guests coming up soon. I know Misty's been on recently. Sabby was on recently. JB was on recently. And there's going to be more exciting guest hosts coming up that are going to join Reef and Colin on INN News. So stay tuned for that. And if anyone didn't know, and this is really the first time I've been live since I did this, but I created a tech show, Tech Tips on Rumble exclusively. It's called Indies Tech Tips, and it's its own channel. And I'm talking about, what my favorite thing, platforms and distribution and how to create content and what the best way to do that is, whether it's through Substack or Discord or Instagram or Twitter. And there's already been 5 episodes uploaded. Looks like it's doing okay so far. Really enjoy making them and writing this up. And a lot of people have been asking me about, how do I do this? And tell me about Telegram. I'm going to be doing something about Telegram soon. Been doing a lot about Substack, and actually the next one that's going to be coming up Friday, you're going to see, I'm going to go through make a Substack post in about 5 minutes and embed podcast episodes right in there and shoot that out. So stay tuned. Indies Tech Tips on Rumble. You can search it there. All right. So what do we got?
All right.
Just
so our last Seuss piece.
Yeah.
Of the evening, which is definitely my favorite, and an oddball Seuss piece that an awful lot of people are not familiar with or haven't read. In fact, the copy I had growing up was missing a few pages, and never knew until way later when I lived in the Keys. Actually, a friend had some books that the local elementary school had gotten rid of, and one of them was an intact copy of my favorite Dr. Seuss book. I had trouble in getting to Solace Alou. So this book has certainly seen some shit. It's been through the trenches. I don't think there's any major scribbling beyond the first page. So yeah, the end of this was one where like you get to the very last takeaway, the moral, and just like I always felt like it was a little blunt, to say the least. So yeah. Oh, Ed, you missed Sneetches and Yertle the Turtle. Yeah, let me get one more hit here before we get into Solace Alou. Oh.
The signature apple. Nice. The Jesse apple.
I have a joint too, but I feel like that would just dry me out too much while I'm trying to read this much.
Yeah, you'll be coughing like
you don't want to have another Ave Maria, you know.
Oh, we don't speak of Ave Maria.
We don't talk about Ave Maria.
But you know, it's really funny because I had Fanto, or I cut it myself. I actually went through that night, and I went through and I cut clips, and I clipped it out and I put it into studio and I shared it with Jesse. I'm like, oh, I gotta. He's like, please don't share that. I'm like, no, I wouldn't do that. I was just doing that to mess with you. But yeah, you know, look, he gave it his all, and he was
sometimes your all isn't good enough, kids.
He was still suffering from the vid, and you know,
It's
look, Bocelli's Bocelli. I mean, what are you gonna do? So, you need all your pipes.
All right,
for that.
so yeah, this is, man, what a gem this bizarre book is. Yeah, I had trouble in getting to Solace Alou. Where's the tank? Hang on 1 second, by God, you want to know where the tank is? I'll show you where the tank is, Colin. That's where the tank is.
Oh, indienews.shop. You can get yourself your very own American tradition tank top in a bunch of different colors.
Where the tank is, sir.
That's right. Pimping the merch.
That's where the tank is, right there.
That's right. Indienews.shop. Indienews.shop. I sound like Cenk Uygur. Oh my God, stop.
So, I feel like I can still do all the voices that I used to do in this. I might not do my last one, but yeah. Sorry, we were just flexing that for a minute. I am going to put my shirt back on. It's cold. I'm in the basement, for God's sakes. Those candles are pretty far away from me, in case you hadn't noticed.
Anthony, sir, get on the ground and drop the guns.
Okay, we're back. That was the striptease portion of the show that you were all promised.
Oh, I can clip that out.
Okay. Slow it down. Yeah. Put my Sade cover over it.
Like the end of Slapshot. Dude, that
I could get like a long, like Virginia Slims kind of cigarette. And just be like...
Oh, that's such a great scene. So funny. Dude skating around, taking his clothes off at the end of the thing. What's he doing? Everybody freaking out. That's such a hilarious movie. Slapshot.
Okay.
Totally inappropriate and would never get made today.
Here we go.
All right, everybody.
I had trouble in getting to Solace Alou, or Life Comes at You Fast. I was real happy and carefree and young, and I lived in a place called the Valley of Vung, and nothing, not anything, ever went wrong. Until, well, one day I was walking along, and I guess I got careless. I guess I got gawking at daisies and not looking where I was walking. And that's how it started. Sock! What a shock! I stubbed my big toe on a very hard rock, and I flew through the air, and I went for a sail, and I sprained the main bone in the tip of my tail. Now, I never had ever had troubles before. So I said to myself, I don't want any more. If I watch out for rocks with my eyes straight ahead, I'll keep out of trouble forever, I said. But watching ahead, well, it just didn't work. I was watching those rocks, then I felt a hard jerk, and a very fresh, green-headed Quilligan quail sneaked up from in back and went after my tail. And I learned there are troubles of more than one kind. Some come from ahead, and some come from behind. So I said to myself, now I'll just have to start to be twice as careful and be twice as smart. I'll watch out for trouble in front and back sections by aiming my eyeballs in different directions. I found this to be quite a difficult stunt, but now I was safe both in back and in front. Then new troubles came from above and below, a scritch at my neck and a skrink at my toe, and now I was really in trouble, you know. The rocks and the quail and the scritch and the skrink. I had so many troubles, I just couldn't think. There I was, all completely surrounded by trouble, when a chap rumbled up in a one-wheeler wobble. "Young fella," he said, "what has happened to you has happened to me and to other folks too. So I'll tell you what I have decided to do. I'm off to the city of Salisaloo on the banks of the beautiful river Wahoo, where they never have troubles, or at least very few. It's not very far, and my camel is strong. He'll get us there fast, so hop on and come along." Well, I jumped up behind him. Then all through that day, the wobble wobbed on in a wobblesome way. The road got more bumpy, more rocky, more tricky. By midnight, I tell you, my stomach felt icky. And so I said, "Mister, please, when do we get to that wonderful town? Aren't we almost there yet?" "Young fella," he told me, "don't start in to stew. At sunrise, we'll arrive in Salisaloo, and you'll have no more troubles. I promise, I do." But when dawn finally came, and the darkness got light, that wonderful city was nowhere in sight. Instead of the city, we ran into trouble. Our camel got sick, and he started to bubble. We had to pull him in the one-wheeler wobble. So there we were, in a dreadful position. Our camel sure needed a camel physician. Now, doctors for camels are not often seen, especially on mountains. They're far, far between. But we pulled that old wobble and set out to find some doctor while dragging our camel behind. I pulled, and pulled. Then the next thing I knew, I was pulling the camel and that wobble chap too. Now really, I thought, this is rather unfair. But he said, "Don't you stew, I am doing my share. This is called teamwork. I furnish the brains, you furnish the muscles, the aches and the pains. I'll pick the best roads, tell you just where to go, and we'll find a good doctor more quickly, you know." Then he sat and he worked with his brain and his tongue, and he bossed me around just because I was young. He told me go left, then he told me go right, and that's what he told me all day and all night. Well, next morning, we located Dr. Sam Snell, who knew all about tonsils and camels as well. Our camel, he said, had a bad case of gleeks and should lie flat in bed for at least 20 weeks. I was tired. How I wanted to crawl in that bed, but the wobble chap sent me away, and he said, "Your troubles are practically all at the next hill and around the next bend, and you'll come to the Happy Way bus route, my friend. The Happy Way bus leaves at 4:42 and will take you directly to Salisaloo, on the banks of the beautiful river Wahoo, where they never have troubles, or at least very few." Well, the bus stop was there, and that part was just fine, but tacked on a stick was a very small sign saying, "Notice to passengers using our line. We are sorry to say that our driver Butch Myers ran over 4 nails and has punctured all tires. So until further notice, the 442 cannot possibly take you to Salisaloo. But I wish you a most pleasant journey by feet. Signed, Bus Line President Horace P. Sweet." So I went on by feet, thanks to Horace P. Sweet, and that Horace P. Sweet almost ruined my feet. Well, 100 miles later, my feet were so sore. Then, wouldn't you know it, it started to pour. I was drenched to the skin when a chap in a slicker splashed up and he yelled, "It's the midwinter jicker! The midwinter jicker came early this year.
and it's not going to be very comfy round here. Any fool would get out, so I've packed up my things, and I'm off to my granddaddy's out in Palm Springs. Take cover, he yelled. Use my house if you wish.
Then the chap in the slicker splashed off like a fish. Played by Walter Brennan, for those who hadn't noticed. That was Walter Brennan's cameo.
That's great.
Oh, God. Well, I ran in the house, and I fell in a heap. I needed my rest, but I just couldn't sleep. Did you ever sleep when your feet were like ice? With a family of owls and a family of mice, I listened all night to the howls and the yowls and the chattering teeth of those mice and those owls, while the midwinter jicker howled horrible howls. I tossed and I flipped and I flopped and I flepped. It was 5:15 when I finally slept. Then I dreamed I was sleeping on billowy billows of soft silk and satin marshmallow stuffed pillows. I dreamed I was sleeping in Salisaloo on the banks of the beautiful river Wahoo, where they never have troubles, at least very few. Then I woke up, and it just wasn't true. I was crashing downhill in a flubulous flood with suds in my eyes and my mouth full of mud and my nose full of water, my ears full of shrieks of the owls flying off with the mice on their beaks. And I said to myself, now I really don't see why troubles like this have to happen to me. Well, I floated 12 days without toothpaste or soap. I practically almost had given up hope, when someone up high shouted, "Here, catch the rope!" Then I knew that my troubles had come to an end, and I climbed up the rope, calling, "Thank you, my friend." I got to the top, but it wasn't a friend, and I saw that my troubles were not at an end. A big man on a horse scared me out of my wits, and he bellowed, "I'm General Genghis Khan Schmitz. There's a war going on, and it's time that you knew. Every lad in this land has his duty to do. We're marching to battle. We need you, my boy. We're about to attack. We're about to destroy the perilous Poozer of Pamplemousse Pass. So get into line. You're a private, first class." Well, he gave me a shooter and one little bean, which was not very much, if you see what I mean. Then he yelled, "Get that Poozer! Attack without fear! The glorious moment of victory is near!" And the glorious general led the advance with a glorious swish of his sword and his lance and a glorious clank of his tin-plated pants. Then we went round a corner and found that, alas, there was more than one Poozer in Pamplemousse Pass, and Genghis Khan Schmitz shouted out to his men, "This happens in war every now and again. Sometimes you are winners, sometimes you are losers. We never can win against so many Poozers. And so I suggest that it's time to retreat." And the army raced off on its tin-plated feet. Well, there I was, with more Poozers than I'd ever seen. There I was, with my shooter and only one bean. There I was, and I thought, will I ever get through to the wonderful city of Salisaloo on the banks of the beautiful river Wahoo, where they never have troubles, at least very few. Well, I had terrible trouble in staying alive. Then I saw an old pipe that said, "Vent number 5. I didn't have time to find out what that meant, but the vent had a hole, and the hole's where I went. Well, that vent where I went was a sort of a funnel that led me down into a frightful black tunnel. The traffic down there was a mess, I must say, with billions of birds going all the wrong way. They bumped me with bikes, and they banged me with dishes. I ran into ladders, beds, bottles, and fishes. I skidded on garbage. I fell in a horn. Troubles. I wished I had never been born. I was down there 3 days in that bird-filled-up place. At least 8,000 times I fell smack on my face. I injured 3 fingers, both thumbs, and both lips, my shin bone, my backbone, my wishbone, and hips. What's more, I was starved. I had nothing to eat. And damp. Was it damp? I grew moss on my feet. Then, Just when I thought I could stand it no more, by chance, I discovered a tiny trapdoor. I popped my head out. The great sky was sky blue, and I knew from the flowers I'd finally come through to the banks of the beautiful river Wahoo. And I couldn't be far now from Salisaloo. There it was, with its glittering towers in the air. I had made it. I'd done it. At last I was there, and I knew that I'd left all my troubles behind when a chap at a doorway that shimmered and shined waved me a wave that was friendly and kind. This, I can't do my voice here because I'd get canceled. It's culturally insensitive. But he used to say, "Welcome." "Welcome," he said, as he gave me his hand. "Welcome, my son, to this beautiful land. Welcome to sweet, sunny Salisaloo, where we never have troubles, at least very few. As a matter of fact, we have only just one little trouble. Imagine, my son, this one little trouble, as you will now see, is this one little trouble I have with this key. There is only one door into Salisaloo, and we have a key-slapping slipard. We do. That troublesome slipard moved into my door 2 weeks ago Tuesday at 3:45. Since then, I can't open this door anymore. And I can't kill the slipard. It's very bad luck to kill any slipard, and that's why we're stuck, and why no one gets in, and the town's gone to pot. It's a terrible state of affairs, is it not? And so, said the doorman of Salisaloo, my job at the door here is finished. I'm through. And I'll tell you what I have decided to do. I'm leaving, he said, leaving Salisaloo, on the banks of the beautiful river Wahoo, where we never have troubles, at least very few, and I'm off to the city of Boolaboo on the banks of the beautiful river Woo Wall, where they never have troubles, no troubles at all. Come on along with me, he said as he ran, and you'll never have any more troubles, young man. I'd have no more troubles. That's what the man said. So I started to go, but I didn't. Instead, I did some quick thinking inside of my head. Then I started back home to the valley of Vung. I know I'll have troubles. I'll maybe get stung. I'll always have troubles. I'll maybe get bit by that green-headed quail on the place where I sit. But I've bought a big bat. I'm all ready, you see. Now my troubles are going to have troubles with me. The moral here is that sometimes violence is the only answer. When someone sets up fake roadblocks for your happiness, get a bat.
Speaking of short stories, if you know any children's book illustrators, E. Heller's looking for a children's book illustrator to turn what? Bacon? Is that bacon, or is that a volcano-based solutions to go into a bacon? Just messing with you, dude. Anyway.
How are we doing? Oh, well, we're a little over the mark time-wise.
That's right. I'm sitting. I'm good.
So I know I'll leave it up to chat. If you guys want that last Lovecraft piece, we will Lovecraft. If not, then maybe next episode we'll split our time between some songs and some stories. I don't know. It's my show, by God. We can do what we want.
Hey, I'm here, man. We're live, so whatever you want. We're good. We're good to go.
Yeah.
Everybody's saying yes. So yeah. Guillotine-based solutions. I like those too. Lava-based, guillotine-based. Yep, they're all good. All right.
So this one, there's actually a moment in this that was the inspiration for a line in La Mort Bohème off of the Co-opt, that references Holmes, Lowell, and Longfellow all being buried in Mount Auburn Cemetery in this, and that line was in my head, and I looked up to see if any of them had been in the Bohemian Club, and turns out 2 of the 3 were. So those 2 ended up in the name dropped in the piece. But this is a Lovecraft story that has been adapted. Recently, Guillermo del Toro, his Netflix special, there was a director that did a take on Pickman's model, and as always, they have to like add in a whole bunch of other stuff or like make a whole bunch of changes to it to try to make it like appeal more to people. And I get if a lot of it is just in its description, especially with this, you would have to get someone that could paint a whole lot of very specific things, and they would need to really do what these descriptions say. So I get why it's not an easy adaptation. Interestingly enough, maybe my favorite that's been done was an episode of the Rod Serling series Night Gallery. They did a version of Pickman's model that it's a little campy, but it honestly is kind of the best. Like someone's tried to do justice to this story. So yeah, this'll I'll try to hustle us through here so we're not too long, but it's about the same length as that other one. So yeah, while Eric Zahn was about someone making weird indescribable music, this piece is about a painter who paints stuff that just really kind of cuts right to the core of. Yes, with Roddy McDowell. Good job. You get 10 YouTube chat guest points. They have no value, but no one can take them away from you.
Actually, Twitch does that type of thing where like you get channel points for watching stuff, and then you can buy like emotes and buy like
nice
highlighted chats and all kinds of stuff. It's kind of cool.
Well, we should do that. We should do Twitch. I want to be able to give people just arbitrary points for just.
We're live on Twitch. We are.
Whose line is it anyway? Well, who's on Twitch right now? Because you know what, they're going to get some fucking points just for attending. They're going to get some participation points.
Twitch.tv/Indie News Network. That's right. We are there, and of course, you can always go and find all the channels, as Reflex say, at indienews.network.
You know, to any of our Twitch viewers right now, get yourself some points out of petty cash. Go do it. We're flush right now. We're sitting pretty. So
that's right. That's right. The
like fucking sultans.
The Twitter auditor is not watching Twitch tonight. So
I'm gonna do my version of like the gang in Gangland when they used to just like hold up all their guns and drugs. I got my Nerf with the laser sight, and I got 1 joint left in this pack of pre-rolls. So I'm just gonna like flex those real quick. I'm like, get yourself some points.
Okay.
Get yourself some nice, kid.
Well, I'm gonna mute my mic, and I'll probably end up using the little boys' room while you start, and I'll take this on my phone. I'll listen to it, and that's one of the beauties of running a stream that's a while, and I get to turn it over to Jesse. Like, this is so rare for me. Normally, I'm like actively running a stream and reading and chat, and holy crap, 8 different screens, and wow, this is like, oh, I could just sit back, chill, and listen to Jesse. Okay. Wow.
Well, enjoy it. This is I think next episode we'll get back to some music. We'll dig through stuff I haven't played on the show before, and like pull out some classic hard hitting political shit. But yeah, this is really fun.
I would take honestly, I would take any acoustic versions of the latest album. That certainly would be on my menu.
That would be fun. Yeah, I did Deep Pop Culture acoustic the other day, and it's fun. That's super fun. So yeah, we'll do that.
Cool.
So yeah, without any further ado, here's our last piece for the night. 1926, Pickman's Model. I know I'm more nervous than I was when you saw me last year, but you don't need to hold a clinic over it. There's plenty of reason, God knows, and I'm lucky to be sane at all. Why the 3rd degree? You didn't used to be so inquisitive. Well, if you must hear it, I don't know why you shouldn't. Maybe you ought to anyhow, for you kept writing me like a grieved parent when you heard I'd begun to cut the art club and to keep away from Pickman. Well, now that he's disappeared, I go round to the club once in a while, but my nerves aren't what they were. No, I don't know what's become of Pickman, and I don't like to guess. You might have surmised I had some inside information when I dropped him, and that's why I don't want to think where he's gone. Let the police find what they can. It won't be much, judging from the fact they don't know yet of the old North End place he hired under the name of Peters. I'm not sure I could find it again myself, nor that I'd even try, even in broad daylight. Yes, I do know, or I'm afraid I know why he maintained it. I'm coming to that. And I think you'll understand before I'm through why I don't tell the police. They would ask me to guide them, but I couldn't go back there, even if I knew the way. There was something there. And now I can't use the subway, or, and you may as well have your laugh at this too, go down into cellars anymore. I should think you'd have known I didn't drop Pickman for the same silly reasons that fussy old women like Dr. Reed or Joe Minot or Rosworth did. Morbid art doesn't shock me, and when a man has the genius Pickman had, I feel it an honor to know him, no matter what direction his work takes. Boston never had a greater painter than Richard Upton Pickman. I said it at first, and I say it still, and I never swerved an inch either when he showed ghoul feeding. That, you remember, was when Minot cut him. You know, it takes profound art and profound insight into nature to turn out stuff like Pickman's. Any magazine cover hack can splash paint around wildly and call it a nightmare or a witch's sabbath or a portrait of the devil, but only a great painter can make such a thing really scare or ring true. That's because only a real artist knows the actual anatomy of the terrible, the physiology of fear, the exact sort of lines and proportions that connect up with latent instincts or hereditary memories of fright, the proper color contrast and lighting effects to stir a dormant sense of strangeness. I don't have to tell you why a Fuseli really brings a shiver, while a cheap ghost story frontispiece really makes you laugh. There's something those fellows catch, beyond life, that they're able to make us see for a second. Dore had it, Syme had it, Angarel of Chicago has it, and Pickman had it as no man ever had it before. I hope to heaven ever will again. Don't ask me what it is they see. You know, in ordinary art, there's all the difference in the world between the vital, breathing things drawn from nature or models and the artificial truck that commercial small fry reel off in a bare studio by rule. Well, I should say that the really weird artist has a kind of vision which makes models or summons up what amounts to actual scenes from the spectral world he lives in. Anyhow, he manages to turn out results that differ from the pretender's mince pie dreams in just about the same way that the life painter's results differ from the concoctions of a correspondence school cartoonist. If I had ever seen what Pickman saw. But, let's have a drink before we get any deeper. God, I wouldn't be alive if I'd ever seen what that man, if he was a man, saw. You recall that Pickman's forte was faces. I don't believe anybody since Goya could put so much of sheer hell into a set of features or a twist of expression. And before Goya, you have to go back to the medieval chaps who did the gargoyles and the chimeras on Notre Dame and Mont Saint Michel. They believed all sorts of things. And maybe they saw all sorts of things too, for the Middle Ages had some curious phases. I remember you asking Pickman yourself once, the year before you went away, wherever in thunder he got such ideas and visions. Wasn't that a nasty laugh he gave you? It was partly because of that laugh that Reed dropped him. Reed, you know, had just taken up comparative pathology. He was full of all this pompous inside stuff about the evolutionary significance of this or that. He said Pickman repelled him more and more every day, and almost frightened him toward the last. He said the fellow's features and expression were slowly developing in a way he didn't like, in a way that wasn't human. He had a lot of talk about diet, and said Pickman must be abnormal and eccentric to the last degree. I suppose you told Reed, if you had any correspondence over it, that he'd let Pickman's paintings get on his nerves or harrow up his imagination. I know I told him that myself, then. But keep in mind that I didn't drop Pickman for anything like this. On the contrary, my admiration for him kept growing. For that ghoul feeding was a tremendous achievement. As you know, the club wouldn't exhibit it. The Museum of Fine Arts wouldn't accept it as a gift. And I can add that nobody would buy it, so Pickman had it right in his house until he went. Now his father has it in Salem. You know, Pickman comes of old Salem stock and had a witch ancestor hanged in 1692. Well, I got into the habit of calling on him quite often, especially after I began making notes for a monograph on weird art. Probably it was his work which put the idea into my head, and anyhow, I found him a mine of data and suggestions when I came to develop it. He showed me all the paintings and drawings he had about, including some pen and ink sketches that would, I verily believe, have gotten him kicked out of the club if many of the members had seen them. Before long, I was pretty nearly a devotee. I would listen for hours like a schoolboy to art theories and philosophic speculations wild enough to qualify him for the asylum. My hero worship, coupled with the fact that people generally were commencing to have less and less to do with him, made him get very confidential with me. And one evening he hinted that if I were fairly close-mouthed and none too squeamish, he might show me something rather unusual, something a bit stronger than anything he had in the house. You know, he said, there are things that won't do for Newbury Street, things that are out of place here, and that can't be conceived here anyhow. It's my business to catch the overtones of the soul, and you won't find those in a parvenu set of artificial streets on made land. Back Bay isn't Boston. It isn't anything yet, because it's had no time to pick up memories and attract local spirits. If there are any ghosts here, they're the tame ghosts of a salt marsh and a shallow cove. And I want human ghosts, the ghosts of beings highly organized enough to have looked on hell and known the meaning of what they saw. The place for an artist to live is the North End. If any aesthete were sincere, he'd put up with the slums for the sake of the masked traditions. God, man, don't you realize places like that weren't merely made, but actually grew? Generation after generation lived and felt and died there, and in days when people weren't afraid to live and feed and die. Don't you know there was a mill on Copp's Hill in 1632, and that half the present streets were laid out by 1650? I can show you houses that have stood 2 centuries and a half more, houses that have witnessed what would make a modern house crumble into powder. What do moderns know of life and the forces behind it? You call the Salem witchcraft a delusion, but I'll wager my 4 times great-grandmother could have told you things. They hanged her on Gallows Hill, with Cotton Mather looking sanctimoniously on. Mather, damn him, was afraid somebody might succeed in kicking free of this accursed cage of monotony. I wish someone had laid a spell on him or sucked his blood in the night. I could show you a house he lived in, and I could show you another one he was afraid to enter in spite of his all fine bold talk. He knew things he didn't dare put into that stupid Magnolia, or that puerile Wonders of the Invisible World. Look here, do you know the whole North End once had a set of tunnels that kept certain people in touch with each other's houses, and the burying ground, and the sea? Let them prosecute and persecute above ground. Things went on every day that they couldn't reach, and voices laughed at night that they couldn't place. Why, man, out of 10 surviving houses built before 1700 and not moved since, I'll wager that in 8 I can show you something queer in the cellar. There's hardly a month you don't read of workmen finding bricked-up arches and wells leading nowhere in this or that old place when it comes down. You could see one near Henchman Street from the elevated last year. There were witches and what their spells summoned, pirates and what they brought from the sea, smugglers, privateers. I tell you, people knew how to live and how to enlarge the bounds of life in the old time. This wasn't the only world a bold and wise man could know. To think of today in contrast, with such pale pink brains that even a club of supposed artists gets shudders and convulsions if a picture goes beyond the feelings of a Beacon Street tea table. The only saving grace of the present is that it's too damn stupid to question the past very closely. What do maps and records and guidebooks really tell of the North End? At a guess, I'll guarantee to lead you to 30 or 40 alleys and networks of alleys north of Prince Street that aren't suspected by 10 living beings outside of the foreigners that swarm them. And what do they know of their meaning? No, Thurber, these ancient places are dreaming gorgeously and overflowing with wonder and terror and escapes from the commonplace, and yet there's not a living soul to understand or profit by them. Or rather, there's only one living soul, for I haven't been digging around in the past for nothing. See here, you're interested in this sort of thing. What if I told you I've got another studio up there, where I can catch the night spirit of antique horror and paint things I couldn't even think of in Newbury Street? Well, naturally, I don't tell those cursed old maids at the club, with Reed, damn him, whispering even as it is that I'm a sort of monster bound down the toboggan of reverse evolution. Yes, Thurber, I decided long ago that one must paint terror as well as beauty from life. So I did some exploring in places where I had reason to know terror lives. I've got a place that I don't believe 3 living Nordic men beside myself have ever seen, and it isn't so far from the elevated as distance goes, but it's centuries away as the soul goes. I took it because of the old brick well in the cellar, one of the sort I told you about. The shack's almost tumbling down so that nobody else would live there, and I'd hate to tell you how little I pay for it. The windows are boarded up, but I like that all the better, since I don't want daylight for what I do. I paint in the cellar, where the inspiration is thickest, but I've other rooms furnished on the ground floor. A Sicilian owns it, and I've hired it under the name of Peters. Now, if you're game, I'll take you there tonight. I think you'd enjoy the pictures, for as I said, I've let myself go a bit there. It's no vast tour. I sometimes do it on foot, for I don't want to attract attention with a taxi in such a place. We can take the shuttle at the South Station for Battery Street, and after that, the walk isn't much. Well, Elliot, there wasn't much for me to do after that harangue but to keep myself from running instead of walking for the first vacant cab we could sight. We changed to the elevated at the South Station. At about 12 o'clock, we'd climbed down the steps at Battery Street, and we struck along the old waterfront past Constitution Wharf. I didn't keep track of the cross streets and can't tell you yet which it was we turned up. When we did, it was to climb through the deserted length of the oldest and dirtiest alley I ever saw in my life, with crumbled-looking gables, broken small-paned windows, and archaic chimneys that stood out half disintegrated against the moonlit sky. I don't believe there were 3 houses in sight that hadn't been standing in Cotton Mather's time. Certainly I glimpsed at least 2 with an overhang, and I thought I saw a peaked roof line of that almost forgotten pre-gambrel type, though antiquarians would tell us there are none left in Boston. From that alley, which had a dim light, we turned to the left into an equally silent and still narrower alley with no light at all, and in a minute made what I think was an obtuse angled bend toward the right in the dark. Not long after this, Pickman produced a flashlight and revealed an antediluvian 10-paneled door that looked damnably worm-eaten. Unlocking it, he ushered me into a barren hallway with what was once splendid dark oak paneling. Simple, of course, but thrillingly suggestive. Then he took me through a door on the left, lighted an oil lamp, and told me to make myself at home. Now, Elliot, I'm what the man in the street would call fairly hard-boiled, but I'll confess that what I saw on the walls of that room gave me a bad turn. They were his pictures, you know, the ones he couldn't paint or even show in Newbury Street, and he was right when he said he had let himself go. Here, have another drink. I need one anyhow. There's no use in my trying to tell you what they were like, because the awful, the blasphemous horror, the unbelievable loathsomeness and moral fetor came from simple touches quite beyond the power of words to classify. There was none of the exotic technique you see in Sidney Syme, none of that trans-Saturnian landscape or lunar fungi that Clark Ashton Smith uses to freeze the blood. The backgrounds were mostly old churchyards, deep woods, cliffs by the sea, the brick tunnels, the ancient paneled rooms, or a simple vault of masonry. Copp's Hill burying ground, which couldn't be many blocks away from this very house, was a favorite scene. The madness and monstrosity lay in the figures in the foreground, for Pickman's morbid art was preeminently one of demonic portraiture. These figures were seldom completely human, but often approached humanity in varying degree. Most of the bodies, while roughly bipedal, had a forward slumping and a vaguely canine cast. The texture of the majority was a kind of unpleasant rubberiness. I can see them now. Their occupations, well, don't ask me to be too precise, but they were usually feeding. I won't say on what. They were sometimes shown in groups in cemeteries or underground passages, and often appeared to be in battle over their prey, or rather their treasure trove. And what damnable expressiveness Pickman sometimes gave the sightless faces of this charnel booty. Occasionally the things were shown leaping through open windows at night, or squatting on the chests of sleepers, worrying at their throats. One canvas showed a ring of them baying about a hanged witch on Gallows Hill, whose dead face held a close kinship to theirs. But don't get the idea that it was all this hideous business of theme and setting which struck me faint. I'm not a 3-year-old kid, and I'd seen much like this before. It was the faces, Elliot. Those accursed faces. They leered and slavered out of the canvas with the very breath of life. By God, man, I verily believe they were alive. That nauseous wizard had waked the fires of hell in pigment, and his brush had been a nightmare-spawning wand. Give me that decanter. There was one thing called the lesson. Heaven pity me that I ever saw it. Listen, can you fancy a squatting circle of nameless dog-like things in a churchyard teaching a small child how to feed like themselves? The price of a changeling, I suppose. You know the old myth about how the weird people leave their spawn in cradles in exchange for the human babes they steal? Pickman was showing what happens to those stolen babes, how they grow up. And then I began to see a hideous relationship in the faces of the human and non-human figures. He was, in all his gradations of morbidity, between the frankly non-human and the degradedly human, establishing a sardonic linkage and evolution. Those dog things were developed from mortals. And no sooner had I wondered what he made of their own young, as left with mankind in the form of changelings, than my eye caught a picture embodying that very thought. It was that of an ancient Puritan interior, a heavily beamed room with lattice windows, a settle, and clumsy 17th century furniture, with the family sitting about while the father read from the scriptures. Every face but one showed nobility and reverence, but that one reflected the mockery of the pit. It was that of a young man in years, and no doubt belonged to a supposed son of that pious father, but in essence it was the kin of the unclean things. It was their changeling, and in a spirit of supreme irony, Pickman had given the features a very perceptible resemblance to his own. By this time, Pickman had lighted a lamp in an adjoining room, and was politely holding open the door for me, asking me if I would care to see his modern studies. I hadn't been able to give him much of my opinions. I was too speechless with fright and loathing, but I think he fully understood and felt highly complimented. And now, I want to assure you again, Elliot, that I'm no mollycoddle to scream at anything which shows a bit of a departure from the usual. I'm middle-aged, decently sophisticated, and I guess you saw enough of me in France to know I'm not easily knocked out. Remember, too, that I'd just about recovered my wind and gotten used to those frightful pictures which turned colonial New England into a kind of annex of hell. Well, in spite of all of this, that next room forced a real scream out of me. I had to clutch at the doorway to keep from keeling over. The other chamber had shown a pack of ghouls and witches overrunning the world of our forefathers, but this one brought the horror right into our own daily life. God, how that man could paint. There was a study called Subway Accident, in which a flock of the vile things were clambering up from some unknown catacomb through a crack in the floor of the Boston Street subway and attacking a crowd of people on the platform. Another showed a dance on Copp's Hill among the tombs with the background of today. Then there were any number of cellar views, with monsters creeping in through holes and rifts in the masonry, and grinning as they squatted behind barrels or furnaces and waited for their first victim to descend the stairs. One disgusting canvas seemed to depict a vast cross-section of Beacon Hill, with ant-like armies of the mephitic monsters squeezing themselves through burrows that honeycombed the ground. Dances in the modern cemeteries were freely pictured, and another conception somehow shocked me more than all the rest. A scene in an unknown vault, where scores of the beasts crowded about one who had a well-known Boston guidebook and was evidently reading aloud. All were pointing to a certain passage, and every face seemed so distorted with epileptic and reverberant laughter that I almost thought I heard the fiendish echoes. The title of the picture was Holmes, Lowell, and Longfellow Lie Buried in Mount Auburn. As I gradually steadied myself and got readjusted to this second room of deviltry and morbidity, I began to analyze some of the points in my sickening loathing. In the first place, I said to myself, these things repelled because of the utter inhumanity and callous crudity they showed in Pickman. The fellow must be a relentless enemy of all mankind to take such glee in the torture of brain and flesh, and the degradation of the mortal tenement. In the second place, they terrified because of their very greatness. Their art was the art that convinced. When we saw the pictures, we saw the demons themselves and were afraid of them. And the queer part was that Pickman got none of his power from the use of selectiveness or bizarrerie. Nothing was blurred, distorted, or conventionalized. Outlines were sharp and lifelike, and details were almost painfully defined. And the faces. It was not any mere artist's interpretation that we saw it. It was pandemonium itself, crystal clear in stark objectivity. That was it, by heaven. The man was not a fantasiste or a romanticist at all. He didn't even try to give us the churning prismatic ephemera of dreams, but coldly and sardonically reflected some stable, mechanistic, and well-established horror world, which he saw fully, brilliantly, squarely, and unfalteringly. God knows what the world could have been, or where he ever glimpsed the blasphemous shapes that loped and trotted and crawled through it. But whatever the baffling source of his images, one thing was plain. Pickman was, in every sense, in conception and in execution, a thorough, painstaking, and almost scientific realist. My host was now leading the way down the cellar to his actual studio, and I braced myself for some hellish efforts among the unfinished canvases. As we reached the bottom of the damp stairs, he fumed his flashlight to a corner of the large open space at hand, revealing the circular brick curb of what was evidently a great well in the earthen floor. We walked nearer, and I saw that it must be 5 feet across, with walls a good foot thick and some 6 inches above the ground level. Solid work of the 17th century, or I was much mistaken. That, Pickman said, was the kind of thing he had been talking about. An aperture of the network of tunnels that used to undermine the hill. I noticed idly that it did not seem to be bricked up, and that a heavy disk of wood formed the apparent cover. Thinking of the things this well must have been connected with if Pickman's wild hints had not been mere rhetoric, I shivered slightly. Then I turned to follow him up a step, and through a narrow door into a room of fair size, provided with a wooden floor and furnished as a studio. An acetylene gas outfit gave the light necessary for work. The unfinished pictures on easels, or propped against the walls, were as ghastly as the finished ones upstairs, and showed the painstaking methods of the artist. Scenes were blocked out with extreme care, and penciled guidelines told of the minute exactitude which Pickman used in getting the right perspective and proportions. The man was great. I say it even now, knowing as much as I do. A large camera on a table excited my notice, and Pickman told me he used it in taking scenes for backgrounds, so that he might paint them from photographs in the studio, instead of carting his outfit around the town for this or that view. He thought a photograph quite as good as an actual scene or model for sustained work, and declared that he employed them regularly. There was something very disturbing about the nauseous sketches and the half-finished monstrosities that leered around from every side of the room, and when Pickman suddenly unveiled a huge canvas on the side, away from the light, I could not for my life keep back a loud scream, the second I had emitted that night. It echoed and echoed through the dim vaultings of that ancient and nitrous cellar, and I had to choke back a flood of reaction that threatened to burst out as hysterical laughter. Merciful Creator, Eliot, I don't know how much was real and how much was feverish fancy, but it doesn't seem to me that Earth can hold a dream like that. It was a colossal and nameless blasphemy with glaring red eyes, and it held in bony claws a thing that had been a man, gnawing at the head as a child nibbles at a stick of candy. Its position was a kind of crouch, and as one looked, one felt that at any moment it might drop its present prey and seek a juicier morsel. But damn it all, it wasn't even the fiendish subject that made it such an immortal fountain head of all panic. Not that, nor the dog face with its pointed ears, bloodshot eyes, flat nose, and drooling lips. It wasn't the scaly claws, nor the mold-caked body, nor the half-hooved feet, none of these, though any one of them might well have driven an excitable man to madness. It was the technique, Eliot.
The cursed, the impious, the unnatural technique. As I am a living being, I never elsewhere saw the actual breath of life so fused into a canvas. The monster was there. It glared and gnawed and gnawed and glared, and I knew that only a suspension of nature's laws could ever let a man paint a thing like that without a model, without some glimpse of the nether world which no mortal unsold to the fiend has ever had. Pinned with a thumbtack to a vacant part of the canvas was a piece of paper, now badly curled up. Probably, I thought, a photograph from which Pickman meant to paint a background as hideous as the nightmare it was to enhance. I reached out to uncurl and look at it, when suddenly I saw Pickman start as if shot. He had been listening with peculiar intensity ever since my shocked scream had waked unaccustomed echoes in the dark cellar, and now he seemed struck with a fright which, though not comparable to my own, had in it more of the physical than the spiritual. He drew a revolver and he motioned me to silence, then stepped out into the main cellar and closed the door behind him. I think I was paralyzed for an instant. Imitating Pickman's listening, I fancied that I heard a faint scurrying sound somewhere, and a series of squeals or beats in a direction I couldn't determine. I thought of huge rats and shuddered. Then there came a subdued sort of clatter, which somehow set me all in gooseflesh, a furtive, groping kind of clatter, though I can't attempt to convey what I mean in words. It was like heavy wood falling on stone or brick. Wood on brick, what did that make me think of? It came again and louder. There was a vibration as if the wood had fallen farther than it had fallen before. After that followed a sharp, grating noise, a shouted gibberish from Pickman, and the deafening discharge of all 6 chambers of a revolver, fired spectacularly as a lion tamer might fire into the air for effect. A muffled squeal or squawk and a thud. Then more wood and brick grating. A pause, and the opening of the door, at which I'll confess I started violently. Pickman reappeared with his smoking weapon, cursing the bloated rats that infested the ancient well. "The deuce knows what they eat, Thurber," he grinned, "for those archaic tunnels touched graveyard and witch den and sea coast, but whatever it is, they must have run short, for they were devilish anxious to get out. Your yelling stirred them up, I fancy. You better be cautious in these old places. Our rodent friends are the one drawback, though I sometimes think they're a positive asset by way of atmosphere and color." Well, Elliot, that was the end of the night's adventure. Pickman had promised to show me the place, and heaven knows he had done it. He led me out of that tangle of alleys in another direction, for when we sighted a lamp-post, we were in a half-familiar street, with monotonous rows of mingled tenement blocks and old houses. Charter Street, it turned out to be, but I was too flustered to notice just where we hit it. We were too late for the elevated, and we walked back downtown through Hanover Street. I remember that wall. We switched from Tremont up Beacon, and Pickman left me at the corner of Joy, where I turned off. I never spoke to him again. Why did I drop him? Don't be impatient. Wait until I ring for coffee. We've had enough of the other stuff, but I, for one, need something. No, it wasn't the paintings I saw in the place, though I would swear they're enough to get him ostracized in 9/10 of the homes and clubs of Boston. And I guess you won't wonder now why I have to steer clear of subways and cellars. It was something I found in my coat the next morning. You know, the curled up paper, tacked to the frightful canvas in the cellar. The thing I thought was a photograph of some scene that he meant to use as a background for that monster. That last scare had come while I was reaching to uncurl it. It seems I had vacantly crumpled it into my pocket. Here's the coffee. Take it black, Elliot, if you're wise. That was the reason I dropped Pickman. Richard Upton Pickman, the greatest artist I've ever known, and the foulest being that ever leaped the bounds of life into the pits of myth and madness. Elliot, old Reed was right. He wasn't strictly human. Either he was born in strange shadow, or he'd found a way to unlock the forbidden gate. It's all the same now, for he's gone. Back into that fabulous darkness he loved to haunt. Here, let's have the chandelier going. Don't ask me to explain or even conjecture about what I burned. And don't ask me either what lay behind that mole-like scrambling Pickman was so keen to pass off as rats. There are secrets, you know, which might have come down from old Salem times.
And Cotton Mather tells even stranger things. You know how damned lifelike Pickman's paintings were, how we all wondered where he got those faces. Well, that paper wasn't a photograph of any background after all. What it showed was simply the monstrous being he was painting on that awful canvas. It was the model he was using, and its background was merely the wall of the cellar studio in minute detail. But by God, Eliot, it was a photograph from life. And that's Pickman's model.
That's wow. Very I don't even know how to. Good night, everybody. Nice. There you go.
Oh God, that was
Do
funny.
That's good to get him to laugh. Oh, that's
Oh,
something.
man.
That's something. I don't know how you follow that up. Like, what are you supposed to do?
What? You know what? I know how I follow that up. I have about a 3-minute Dr. Seuss piece we'll close out with.
You literally just boop, drop it. Get out of it.
I'm gonna dip us right back into this. This is a really great short. Again, Dr. Seuss could just oh, thank you. Seriously. Dr. Seuss was great at putting together a really quick, solid little gem like this. This is the Zacks. One day, making tracks in the prairie of Prax, came a north-going Zacks and a south-going Zacks. And it happened that both of them came to a place where they bumped. There they stood, foot to foot, face to face. Look here now, the north-going Zacks said. I say, you are blocking my path. You are right in my way. I'm a north-going Zacks, and I always go north. Get out of my way now, and let me go forth. Who's in whose way? Snapped the south-going Zacks. I always go south, making south-going tracks. So you're in my way, and I ask you to move, and to let me go south in my south-going groove. Then the north-going Zacks puffed his chest up with pride. I never, he said, take a step to one side. And I'll prove to you that I won't change my ways if I have to keep standing here 59 days. And I'll prove to you, yelled the south-going Zacks, that I can stand here in the prairie of Prax for 59 years, for I live by a rule that I learned as a boy back in south-going school. Never budge. That's my rule. Never budge in the least. Not an inch to the west, not an inch to the east. I'll stay here, not budging. I can and I will, if it makes you and me and the whole world stand still. Well, of course, the world didn't stand still. The world grew. In a couple of years, the new highway came through, and they built it right over those two stubborn Zacks and left them there, standing unbudged in their tracks. Another great Twitter analogy, right?
I always love that picture of the cars on like the figure 8. Like that reminds me of childhood right there. The Zacks, that's the Zacks is throwbacks for guys in their 40s. I'll tell you right now.
Well, man, this seriously was such a blast. I can't thank you guys enough for hanging out. Again, it's super touching, whether it's like Christmas songs and Christmas stories or Dr. Seuss and Lovecraft. The fact that I've got my regulars, you know, I seriously, you guys mean the world to me. It's always a blast. Tonight was no exception. So yeah. We'll
be back hopefully in a couple of weeks. We'll have another American tradition. Yeah. I don't know if are you still working on that show with Crab? Are we actually doing that thing, that class 4 consciousness? I don't know.
Last I talked to him, he was talking about a different show idea. Okay. I can say that he officially sent me a track to listen to, and I wrote way too many lyrics for it already. So wheels are in motion for the crossover collaboration.
I love
which
it.
is just going to be fantastic. I'm really excited about. So
we got to get Reef together with you guys too, and Reef's going to play some percussion stuff maybe, and figure out how we're going to finagle that. You know, Reef says, by the way, that there's a way to do that with Zoom so that you turn off like that delay that you're talking about.
Yeah, and a way to cut the latency out. We need to try to figure it out, because man, oh my gosh, if we could combine our powers, there's no stopping us. Like,
that'd be sick. All right.
And again, if we need some new instruments, we can always just take it out of petty cash. So sorry, I'm not gonna let that die now. I'm gonna have a lot of fun with that.
Oh boy. So tomorrow
hey, if we're gonna
night,
get audited, we might as well have fun with it.
Tomorrow night, we are gonna have joining Colin and Reef, a member of the Uhuru movement, APSP, the African People's Socialist Party. And I'm not sure. I think it's Aquila that's going to be joining us. Very excited for that. So stay tuned tomorrow night. I believe that's 9 p.m. Eastern. Thank you. Yes, I know, Fidel Castro. I know you're very excited too. And who else? What else? No show this Sunday night. No, how do we miss that? We're going to be dropping clips. If you didn't see the Johnny Miller, Tara Reid interview, it was late last night, midnight Eastern, I believe it started. So it was really good. Tara said it was phenomenal. She was really happy with the way it came out. And we got a bunch of clips that are going to be dropping over the next few days there. We still have a couple clips.
Wait, no, come here. There's my big boy. No, there's my giant cat.
He does. Don't
go on the computer.
Well, that's cats. That's cats. They're like, no, I'm not doing that. Fuck you. So then we'll have a couple more clips with the chairman, Omali Yashitella, from APSP as well. From the Uhuru movement from last Monday night with Tara. She's been killing it lately. So go support Tara. Thank you so much for the super chats, by the way. Thank you, everybody. We are monetized now. We hit our 1,000 viewers, our 1,000 subscribers. Appreciate everybody pitching in and sharing the links to support that. And here we grow. We keep going, and just so excited for where we're going and what's happening. You know, we got deplatforming, and we're everywhere. So if YouTube does decide they don't like us after a while, you're going to find us on Rumble, and we're on rockfin.com/INN, rockfin.com/INN. We've got a couple thousand people following us over there. So hi on Rockfin. I know we don't hear from you much, but I'm glad that you're there too. So, all right, we're midnight Eastern, 2 hours. All right, everyone, have yourselves a good night, everybody. I haven't said it for a while.
Bye, everybody.
Keep questioning everyone's motivations, and I think after the last month, we can certainly say that more than ever. So,
everyone.
All right. Let's see. Do I have a way to go out here? I think I do. Where's our outro? Outro. No, that's Tara's outro screen. INN outro. No, I think it's at the end here. I lost it. I got it. All
right, we're outro.
The outro pillow. Nice. I love it. The outro pillow. I know I set this up somewhere, and now it's eluding me. Oh, I guess it's this one. Okay. Good night, everybody. Indie News Network, collaborative family of independent content creators. Co-hosted normally by me, Indy. I'm founder and editor of Indie Left News and Indie Media Today. I got Reef Breland sitting next to me. We're all founding members, like I said.
And then the Indie News Network.
My name is Jesse Jett.
It's American tradition.
What's up, Space Monkeys? Welcome to Political Fight Club. I'm Robert Durden.
Go to malentsplain.com.
Welcome to another episode of the show your parents warned you about. It's Reef After Dark.
Guys, it's Tommy Nate with Tommy Nation Politics.
I mean, I mostly make art, Brian, and
Big Man Crab Joe. Keep up those great videos.
I'm Tatami of the YouTube channel Tatami's Diary.
Is Andrew Rivera on The Handsome Cynic?
Stay high, everybody.
Hey guys, it's Yeti coming at you.
Politics is survival. Hello, my name is Lucy from Blue Moon Red Wine.
This is Chris Legion, and peace out.
Lesbos says Colin too fancy.
No, don't do that to me. Oh.
Keep fighting that good fight out there, guys. I'll talk to you later.